Hello, this is Hushang Amir Ahmadi, a distinguished service professor at Rutgers University. In today's video, I will discuss the relationship between capitalism and coronavirus pandemic. Is there a relationship? We will see. First, I did speak about this subject in two videos in Persian that is posted actually on this same YouTube channel of mine. This will be my first in two more perhaps videos in English on the subject of coronavirus, the world capitalism, US capitalism, and consequences beyond. So let me then begin with what already others have said. Just let me point to two positions or people. One is Mr. Kissinger, who basically have said that coronavirus is a danger to liberal democracy, to capitalism, to this capitalist world order, and that he thinks that the world community have to cooperate on the health side and on public policy sides to quickly cure this menace and save the world capitalism. So he actually sees a serious danger coming from this pandemic for the world capitalism, for the US capitalism as well, of course. Another person is Mr. Chomsky, Professor Chomsky of MIT, who basically have said that as long as liberal capitalism exists, there is no solution to this pandemic, that this capitalism is indeed sort of an obstacle to a solution. He says the global warming, the nuclear bomb, and all of this, which has been produced under capitalism, are other examples of or menaces that have no cure under capitalism. Somehow, these two gentlemen and others seem to think that coronavirus is a cause rather than an effect. Although Chomsky does point toward some kind of an effect coming here into play as coronavirus, the cause being liberal capitalism, but he really hasn't explained that in any detail. And he particularly hasn't explained why he does see this as an effect to begin with, and why there is a relationship between liberal capitalism or capitalism and this pandemic. He just hasn't explained that. Let me try. This will be, I don't know, but perhaps to the best of my knowledge, this would be the first attempt at explaining coronavirus a bit differently. Let me begin by capitalism. Capitalism has been with us for about 300 years, more or less, since the end of 19th century. It followed mercantilism, the economic basis of colonialism, which was based on trade, and of course industrial revolution, which is really the real starting point of this modern capitalism. Capitalism is an economic system that is based on wage labor and its relation to capital and capitalism. Therefore, is a wage labor sort of economic system. But what really makes capitalism different from any previous systems, economic systems, it's not just it's based on wage labor. Of course, it's based on wage labor, it's based on free market, it's based on free trade and competition. Under capitalism, competition is an unlimited something that happens between unlimited number of capitalist players. That's the way it used to be. But that competition really is and was the engine, the motor of capitalist development. Without competition, capitalism couldn't be the most productive economic system that human being has ever created. That competition between capitalists led to all kinds of stuff. For example, the very competition among competing players led to monopolies, to oligopolies, to companies that are price makers, not price takers, which is supposedly the case under capitalism. But most importantly, that competition led to a tremendous advancement in technology. And that word technology is the key in my explanation in today's video. But I will explain this, but before that, let me just say that as this competition moved on, monopolies were created, oligopolies were created, trade unions were created, markets became less perfect, competition became less perfect, international trade became increasingly less free and managed, and so on. So liberal capitalism gradually moved in the direction of something that was not as capitalistic as it used to be back, let's say, 200 years ago, or even 100 years ago. It increasingly became concentrated, centralized in the hands of a few players as opposed to many. And these few, some countries, some companies, continued competition at national and global level. Global competition became the key in defining capitalism globally. Competition among nations, but also among companies, firms, and so on. Now, as I said, that competition led to tremendous advancement in technology. But first, let me explain what technology is. Technology is not just a piece of machine. Technology is a process. Technology is a relationship. But it is a relationship between what and what? Well, in economic terms, technology at the bottom line is the relationship between human being, the one that works, the labor, and the nature on which it works. Technology is that relationship. In fact, that very labor process, that is, as the people work on nature and change the nature on the basis of what they need to use, that very process creates not just products, but technologies. Technology is an endogenous something that happens inside that labor process in the relationship between people and nature. Well, regardless of whether you are a religious guy or not, nature obviously existed before human beings. Either human beings were evolved from the nature, or God created it afterward and placed it in the nature or on the nature. Either case, this individual, this human being, started interacting with that nature. Woods, rivers, land, and so on. To make a long story short, the human being used to be gatherers, and then they created the first ever revolution. At that time, one of the most important revolution of probably human history was agriculture. That's when these people that either God created or nature started using the nature, the land, to produce something. But the minute they started doing that, they needed tools, they needed procedures, they needed ideas to think in terms of how to do it. Those tools particularly advanced over time significantly, all the way to tractors of today and more. So, but this evolution from agriculture, as I said, moved to trade, to mercantilism, to capitalism. In capitalism, for the first time, the relationship between people and nature was transformed. It was transformed into what we now call an industrial process. A process during which raw materials, semi-products, and so on are transformed into commodities. But they are transformed using tools, meaning technologies. These are engineering processes. These are engineering tools. These are machines. These are knowledge. These are inventions. These are innovations that kept happening. But alongside these developments, another important development was happening, and that was the scientific revolution. Science started revolving into something significantly different than human being knew. From 16th century onward, science had gradually moved in the direction of trying to find out what is going on. It moved beyond philosophy to just explain deductively what it is that this world is about. It moved inductively into trying to experiment, to digest, to dissect what that piece of something was. It created labs, all kinds of other stuff, physics, chemistry, and so on. Science started advancing rapidly. But you know, what really scientific advancement at the end of this thing means, this process? It means discovering the law of nature more and more. The more science progressed, the more human being was able to understand the laws of nature, to discover these laws, physical laws, chemical laws, mathematical laws, and biological laws, medical laws, all kinds of laws that were already built in the nature. We did not create these laws in science, in labs. We discovered them as they were in this nature. So scientific process is not creating laws, it's discovering the laws that were there. But here is the thing. The more we discover the laws, the more we use those laws, those procedures, those technologies to discover more laws and processes and discoveries. So we got deeper and deeper into nature. And we continue. There is no end to it. And this is where my 2 cents come. As a human being, alongside capitalism, the most advanced, productive economic system in the world, as they together advanced, used each other, they both started using nature and harming nature. Why I say harming nature? Because the more we discovered the nature, the more we mastered the nature, the more the nature came under control, the more it got crippled. They call global warming, they call all kinds of green gas effects, and I don't know, all kinds of stuff. I'm not an environmentalist, but one thing I know is that this scientific discoveries and the need of capitalism for competition among states and companies led to a serious advancement of science and technology, which acted upon the nature, creating services and products, selling globally for profit or for anything. Now, the more this nature got crippled, the more I believe the nature got angry at us. The nature reacted. At times, nature does react. Many people say that this coronavirus was a mutation in a lab in China from an animal. Mutation, meaning that they were trying to do something scientifically, but somehow something happened beyond their control. And that led to this virus. Now, I am not saying that Chinese did it. Please don't misunderstand me. I am just using that as an example. I am not even sure if that was in a Chinese lab or in a country A lab or B lab. What I am saying is that human beings' interaction with nature went beyond limit, beyond to a point where the nature at times react. Believe me, nature has a self-defensive mechanism. And it shows us all the time, from earthquakes to storms to all kinds of stuff. Now, so viruses are a product of human interaction with nature. That's what I'm trying to say. Just like a car is the product of our interaction with nature. Of course, in the car, you have the first nature, the second nature, that is to say, the raw material and the semi-finished products and so on. But at the end of the day, a car is two things: people, that is their labor, and the nature. This nature is either the first nature or produced nature. That is nature that we have already produced, and we put that in the car, and also nature that hasn't yet been produced and gets produced and puts in the car. The bottom line, the interaction between human being and nature produces things. It has produced our cities. It has produced our other communities. It has produced all kinds of tools that we use in production, from agriculture to service to industry. It has produced all kinds of stuff that we use at home or in the streets. Everything you see around it has been produced by the human being working on the nature. First nature or second nature, it's nature. Coronavirus, just like other pandemics, are the products of the interaction between human being and the nature. Now, I am not saying that if, for whatever reason, there was no interaction between human being and the nature, there will not be a disease. Well, the fact is that we have no idea of that. With our history, our knowledge doesn't really go beyond what we really know about this. That is, I don't know anybody personally knows or scientifically knows that there was a time that there was absolutely no interaction between people and the nature, and there was also a virus. Even if there was a virus, that virus was hidden in the nature. It wasn't in the body of the person. At least the history of medical science doesn't tell us that Adam and Eve died of diseases of any kind. We don't know. We have no idea of it. What I am saying is, even if nature had these diseases, these viruses, these pandemics inside it, it was inside it. Our interaction brought them up, brought them out. Just like our interaction with the nature made the car and refrigerator. Therefore, what I am saying actually is the coronavirus is not the cause, is the effect of what is happening now or will happen later. to our life, to capitalism or everything else. We need to see coronavirus not as a cause, but as an effect of a cause. That cause being our interaction as human beings with the nature, scientifically speaking, and in terms of production, labor process. That labor process, there was a time when that labor process was gatherer, then was agriculture, then was trader, and then was, industrial, and so on. There was a labor process, and there is a labor process as we speak. So this is my 2 cents. And what that really means is that to cure corona and other pandemics, we really need to take a closer look at what we are doing in our scientific and technological advancements to our nature. As long as we do what we have been doing to nature for the sake of scientific development, technological development, for competition, for making more money, more better life, whatever, we will be causing coronaviruses of many types. And that coronavirus, this one may disappear, but the next will come, because that virus is built into our relationship with the nature, our scientific relationship, our technological relationship. Science has moved and technologies have moved to a point where it really making that is sickening, I may say, nature. Science and technology advancements is sickening nature. They are deepening and deepening and deepening into the nature beyond belief. Of course, we are still in the prehistory of scientific and technological development. Let me point that out. I believe that despite all the advancements that we have had in science and technology, we are still in the prehistory of science and technology. The future will be even more advanced, perhaps more devastating to our life. Of course, as science and technology has created problems, it has also solved problems. Let's look at the other side of the glass that is full. Science and technology have indeed made this great life of us possible for us. It has created all these things that we needed, and we now have them, from electricity to car to plane to computers, and you name it. So there is a plus side, but there is also that negative side that I spoke about. And that's exactly because of the plus side that we have an urge to move forward with science and technology. Our, unfortunately, needs and wants as human beings is simply unlimited. And because it's so unlimited, we will continue advancing in the direction of more sophisticated science and technologies, sickening the environment, deepening into the environment more and more, creating at the same time not just the plus but also the minus side of this process. Now, let me move from here to the consequences that is following. Again, I just wanted to establish my 2 cents that I don't see coronavirus as an effect, as a cause, but as an effect. And from that perspective, I have a different solution than, of course, those who see coronavirus as a cause. Those who see coronavirus as a cause, they will just simply be looking into creating better medical sciences, but that moving toward more advanced medical sciences, meaning to digging more into the nature, will create even more problems. We need to take a step back, sit, and think seriously about our relationship with nature. But unfortunately, as I said, this has become impossible because competition among nations, that is states and companies, is almost impossible to control. And that competition is leading us toward this destructive process as well as constructive process that we are involved in with nature. We just have to take both sides. We just don't have an option. Now, moving forward, I believe the word capitalism, which until recently has been very productive, very competitive, very progressive, seems to, in my view, hit some sort of an obstacle here. More monopolies, more oligopolies, bigger firms, more bankruptcies of smaller and medium size, and particularly with this corona, more unemployment, more bankruptcies of the smaller, and unfortunately, I have to say, a bigger urge in the part of us, the states and the companies, to further advance toward technologies and science. But I have to tell you one thing. One thing I predict is this, that this liberal capitalism not only is becoming increasingly more monopolistic and state-centered, company-centered, as opposed to millions of competitors or billions of competitors, but a few centered. But at the same time, what is happening here is the fact that this coronavirus is going to create a world that is much more controlled tomorrow than it was today or yesterday. Let me explain. And here is the key. One thing that happened over the last 2 decades was not just science and technology advancement, but the fact that this science and technology spread across borders and they were hardly controlled. Many even didn't want to control, although in certain respects, scientific discoveries, technological edges were indeed controlled. But for a short period, perhaps, they spread. What I see now coming is that the future scientific and technological developments will be controlled by those who advance them. That's where the problem comes. That companies and countries are no longer willing, and they will no longer be willing to share scientific findings and technological developments. Perhaps one big problem, I will explain that in the next video, that the America had was that it developed all the science and technologies, but let them go. Every other country just picked them. And then they used them to compete with America and create problem. I'm sure in the near future, America will be extremely nationalistic about its science and technology, that it will make every effort to control them and to make them stay away from other countries, that it will put millions, maybe thousands, of technological and scientific spies all over, making sure the Chinese don't steal the American technologies and science findings, or for the same matter, Japanese or Europeans. So I see a future that is advanced way beyond what it is today in terms of science and technology, but that is also very controlled within national borders. Now, what follows from this is disaster, because it could really close off nations from each other. It could isolate them. It could create wars. You know, when you start controlling something and then somehow that goes beyond your control, then you may, in fact, decide to control that in a different way or to kill the competition differently. It's a very dangerous time ahead of us. Global capitalism will certainly decline tremendously. It will become increasingly more nationalistic. Globalization will increasingly move toward localization. National identities, cultures, way of life becomes very important. I may say, unfortunately, nations may even move to the point of where we may call national fascism, which is very possible. Capitalism will certainly move beyond competitive capitalism. It's not even state capitalism that we will see soon, like what China has or the US has. They're going to have to move beyond state capitalism into a kind of socialistic capitalism. I don't know yet the name for it. Sort of a capitalism that has a state superstructure, but the infrastructure of it, the economic system of it, is increasingly more similar to socialism because it is so concentrated and centralized, but run by the state, and a state that may not be democratic anymore. You know, China gives me that example. Is China a capitalist state? Of course not. China is a socialist system that uses capitalism with the command of the state. The state does not just simply control the political system. The state owns the economic system. All of these huge Chinese firms are not private. They are state firms. But all of these big American huge firms are private firms. The American political system may be in control of these huge companies, but not to the point, to the kind of control that we see in China, that Chinese government exercises on its own companies, because those companies are the Chinese government companies. while the American companies are not American government companies. They are private companies. I believe the world increasingly will become more like China, but even beyond. US, I can see soon to become more like China, rather than China more like the US. I will discuss this in the next video and tell you what could happen to America, to the American capitalism, its competition with China and other countries, and which country will be, or which countries will be the losers and winners of this pandemic called coronavirus. Again, coronavirus as an effect rather than a cause. Talk to you next.